Well, hello there, friends. It's January 17th. I got to make sure I put that up on places because life is just moving very fast. And I am here to talk about the ICE tactics I have seen over the last week. And in order to help people, not just in Minneapolis, prepare for ICE, but really the rest of us who are not there, who are currently kind of just watching from the sidelines, horrified at what we are seeing. I'm not trying to be the humanist report here. I am here to expressly provide practical strategies and tactics, things that you can be doing now and in the future to prepare for this. Because that's what I'm doing in the background. For those of you new here, I'm AJ, aka Squid. I'm a motorcycle coach, trainer, educator, but professionally, I am also a cybersecurity engineer. So I pay a lot of attention to stuff like this, what the cops are doing, what police are doing, and how policy and politicians handle our freedom, because that is of deep interest to me. And I hope it's of interest to you too. So the first thing to understand is that their tactics are escalating. After Jonathan Ross killed Renee Good a week or so ago, they have been given verbal immunity to everything by Trump, by Stephen Miller, by the full regime.
To all ICE officers, you have federal immunity in the conduct of your duties. And anybody who lays a hand on you or tries to stop you or tries to obstruct you is committing a felony. You have immunity to perform your duties, and no one, no city official, no state official, no illegal alien, no leftist agitator or domestic insurrectionist can prevent you from fulfilling your legal obligations and duties. And the Department of Justice has made clear that if officials cross that line into obstruction, into criminal conspiracy against the United States or against ICE officers, then they will face justice.
From a legal perspective, I have no idea what the fuck this means. But what I want you to always remember is that this only works as long as the people who believe in this stay in charge, formally in power. So if they're saying stuff like this, to me, that says that is how they're thinking, that they're not going to have to leave power. Now, is that because they have some grand plan, or is that because they're just really only thinking one step ahead? I leave that up to interpretation, but I have my own beliefs that I think will become clear as we talk. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So of course, when you're given full immunity, you are going to escalate situations. And that is what we have seen now. It is like a full-on fucking war zone in Minneapolis.
Shame on you.
Listen, have y'all not learned from the past couple of days? Have you not learned?
Learned what? What's our lesson here? What do you want us to learn?
Following federal agents.
Give me my phone back. No, you can't take my phone.
This is your warning. This is your warning.
For what?
Stop fucking following us. You are impeding operations.
So let people go to church.
You did not learn from what just happened? I'm not going to tell you again. You got to move. Get out of the way.
I don't pose.
5 ICE officers approached my vehicle, boxed me in with their vehicles, and all 5 of them forcibly removed me from my car, threw me to the ground, which is where I got some of the road rash on my face. And I was detained at the Whipple Detention Center for approximately 10 hours yesterday.
I came across an ICE agent. They were turning onto a major highway, and as they were turning, I had a walk signal on and started crossing the street. And when I wasn't moving as quickly as they would like, both the driver and passenger jumped out of the car, and they pulled weapons on us while they were driving, I might add. Not even pulled over, and fired rubber bullets.
Car crashes are happening constantly because ICE is hitting people intentionally and unintentionally and then just arresting them so they can get away with it. You're seeing a lot more violence. They're a lot more weapons free with their crowd control. When I'm talking about crowd control, I'm mainly talking about these 3 tools. So gas, which we have seen, there's various colors. I'm not an expert on this, but everything I have heard is that you need to avoid breathing this stuff in. If you're planning to be out there, now is a great time to get a gas mask of some form. Flashbangs are being deployed all the time. And although they are designed to just, be loud and incapacitate you, and I've been very, very close to one of these going off and having that happen, they're also extremely dangerous. It's like a grenade. There will be fragments of shrapnel near this device that can hit you, that can cut you open, that can hurt you seriously, burn you very badly.
Holy shit.
Oh, fuck me. Well, we're rolling. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. We saw the poor family that had a flashbang thrown in their car and one of their children stopped breathing. They all had to go to the hospital afterward. You protect yourself by covering your body. Obviously, it's wintertime, so most people are out there in like winter weather gear and covered up, but you may want to consider things like eye protection. And that takes us to pepper spray and pepper balls. A poor trans man was hit in the eye with a pepper ball and is now going to lose their eye. So
my surgeon that worked on it, he said, yeah, he's almost certain I'll never see out of it again. I'm still worried about those neurotoxins because they won't tell us what the munition was or what metal was in it. Yeah, I need people to know. I can't just sit down and not have my story told. I think it's like my duty as someone who went through this to like, you know, showcase how violent DHS can get with people. And if we are met with violence for peacefully speaking our mind, then that means we do not have that First Amendment right.
Wearing some sort of eye protection or helmet, these are just really basic level things. When I go out, I'm wearing my motorcycle helmet a lot, which provides me both head protection and eye protection. Goodwills are filled with this shit for very cheap. Here's the contrast though of what I have seen. ICE has never been more vulnerable. It's very obvious these people are poorly trained and really don't fully grasp the risk that they are taking with their actions, which is why they are really extending themselves and doing things that you only do when powerful people tell you this. Because they're overriding their own survival instincts. We're seeing lots of moments where single officers will extend themselves. Think about that hilarious, amazing video of that ICE agent running out of the car and slipping on the ice right in front of everybody and just getting totally laughed at.
Our tax money paid for this!
And now people are memeing it amazingly, and that's very important resistance work. The Sub-Zero GIF is my favorite. You know, these dudes aren't lining up in these rigid phalanxes where they are pressing forward. You know, like it is just like dude here, dudes, like car over here, and you'll just have people like way the fuck out there, easily grabbable, easily attackable, right? But people aren't. They're not yet. Minneapolis has an estimated 430K people. It really doesn't matter if there are 3,000 ICE agents or 10,000 or 40,000. The ICE agents probably think of themselves as like Spartans, right? We're there for every one of them. You know, they could take 100 of every dumb Minnesotan or whatever. But like, that's just totally not true. Remember the testing requirements, which are basic things like sit-ups and push-ups and jogging, and they had to constantly lower the physical requirements to be an ICE agent. They had to constantly lower. They don't really do background checks anymore. A totally liberal, Trump-hating journalist got accepted into ICE because they are just doing zero vetting. And this goes to the short that I made earlier this week. These are really just white supremacists. That is the qualification that is required to be an ICE agent. You have to be very, very comfortable doing the job of committing horrific, inhuman violence against other people who are black, brown, have other countries of origin. The Venn diagram of like white supremacists and normal, functional human beings who can exist in our society as it exists and like carry on a job and have normal relationships is effectively nobody. It is a matter of time before this happens, before they experience people giving them what they give out. And there are millions of Americans very, very capable of being as violent as ICE agents. And that is what the next escalation, the next phase of this conflict, I think, is going to be, is when that happens. These two things right here, when you take highly vulnerable people who are poorly trained and just they're just very angry and they want to do violence, and then you tell them, hey, full immunity on a population that has millions of guns, inevitability. Just like Renee Good's death, it was an inevitable outcome that was just waiting to happen. And the Trump regime, Stephen Miller and all them, they are more than happy to feed ICE agents to this machine to generate that. So it's coming one way or another. What we are seeing right now is the true nature of a unfortunately significant number of people in this country. When you tell people there will be no consequences for actions, you see who they really are. If I was given full immunity, my first thought process wouldn't be to arm up and start harassing my neighbors. It would be expropriating money from billionaires. And that's why I want to talk about the just doing their job. So this has been the classic police line for years. So just to be clear why this is bullshit, and if you are having conversations with family members, don't argue with dipshits on the internet, but what is the job? You know, like the job, Nazis were just doing their job, right? We have a whole defense we talked about with that. I was just doing what the guy above me said. This doesn't need to be a job. We don't need to be deporting people like this. We don't need to be violently deporting them. We could be fixing the border. We could be resolving our immigration process. We could be working to dismantle borders, which really just cause conflict. If somebody says this, the real question you need to get into is, what are their values? Because ICE's job is explicitly racist violence. That is their job. So you either do not understand that, that's an education issue, or you support it, which is far more likely whether or not they admit it. I had a conversation with the right-wing propagandist Katie Daviscourt back at the Federal Building in July around an ICE immigration-related protest. And I got to talk to her for a little bit, and it really laid bare not only the hypocrisy, but that they don't really care about their hypocrisy. They will simply say things without truly meaning them. And I don't even know if they understand it.
It doesn't take a lot to care about the guy at Home Depot not being able to go to his family, who knows that they're going to eat that.
I think it's sad, but they made that choice.
The kids didn't make any choices.
The kids didn't, but the dad did.
So you're cool with punishing children. You're cool with punishing children, right? I mean, that's the logical conclusion.
I just think everyone should follow the nation's
Yeah,
laws.
I mean, it's very convenient, right? No, I don't know. Absolutely not.
Why not?
If a law is going to cause people to get hurt, do you care about children?
Yes, I love kids.
Okay, but not enough to let their father go home, right? Not enough to force the politicians to figure out what needs to happen with immigration first. They need to be harmed first.
You're giving me a scenario that just doesn't apply.
You're giving me a scenario that's happening all the time. That's happening right now in LA constantly. They're going to Home Depots and getting picked up.
They're doing that here too.
Yeah, and that sucks. Yeah, okay, so I'm giving you a realistic scenario that is happening right now.
And I've already told you, they made that choice. So
But you've also said you don't care about children. So you either don't care about children.
Care about the children.
You just, not if they get hurt because their dad just happens to be illegal. Then it's fine, right? Then fuck the kids, right? Be honest.
In their worldview, violently deporting immigrants, hurting children is okay when you break the law. Because ultimately, obedience to an authority is what they value. That was cool that I caught that. I'm using that take even though the read was bad because of that. And why do they believe in obedience to an authority over everything else? Because these people are Christian nationalists. That's going to be one of your biggest reasons. That's not a plus sign. There we go. Their values are tied to their Christian faith, which is very much kind of a la carte. Modern American Christianity is very whatever you feel. It's very tied to capitalism. And there's a lot of racism and homophobia in it. And that justifies the job that ICE is doing. Therefore, that is why they will say this. So again, you got to get to this core here. Don't have these bullshit conversations. Have this conversation because that's what we need to be doing. When people are talking about what their job is, the other thing to also note is that, boy, they sure do that job with a lot of overt disrespect and violence, which again is justified with this, right? Because obedience is critical. But boy, this is becoming a big problem for a lot of people, as it should. Because if the people in your streets act like this, I mean, you're going to have a extremely chaotic, violent society because people aren't going to put up with this. Nobody wants to put up with overt disrespect and violence from people who are valorized in our communities, who are told that we should obey. This does not create obedience. The problem is if you want obedience, you can't be doing this to people. You're just not gonna get it. And yet that is how these Christian nationalists, that's how these fascists think, is that, oh yeah, you're not gonna do this? Well, you need to add more violence then until you obey. When you give full immunity to fascists and white supremacists and neo-Nazis, this is what you're gonna get. You're gonna get a lot of threats and a lot of cruelty. So that's just a logical conclusion from that. And then the other reality is that money is why a lot of people are doing this. Not just because they had no opportunities, which I'm sure some of these people probably struggled to maintain normal jobs. But there is also a lot of people in here who have left the police, who have left the prison system, who have left fucking security guard jobs or other opportunities because the money is so ridiculous. ICE agents make more than highly paid technical professionals in Seattle. This is one of the best professions as far as financial compensation goes. All of these professions right here are now better paid being an ICE agent. And that's a huge problem of incentives. We need to take back power so that we can take this money back from them. I am so tired of my fucking tax dollars going to this shit. All right, so now that that stuff is said, let's talk about how we prepare yourself and your community for a gang of violent, armed, immune white supremacists to come into it. In states like Washington, we have had ICE here already, but they have largely stuck to rural communities, or they are hitting up kind of the common places like Home Depots, but in a very difficult to predict fashion, and they are doing it in these quick, light strikes. So the first thing I recommend doing is beginning the process of setting up a response network. And what that is just a channel of communication between community members who can talk about seeing ICE. I recently read an article from Crime Think, and I'll go ahead and link that in the description and probably put a little screenshot of it here. But the best practices that we are seeing come out of Minneapolis, which is a much more scaled up version of what a lot of us are hopefully going to need to do, at least, what we need to do here in Washington right now, is to create a big group for your sightings. And so this is where people are simply going to say, because the first step is just confusion. Hey, there's a group of cops, there's a group of black vehicles in this Home Depot parking lot. Is it ICE? Is it something else? You got to figure that out first. I recently wandered by an apartment complex where there was a reported ICE abduction, and I talked to the security guards there and found out that it wasn't ICE. They told me a very different story of what it was, which is good to know because we need to know what places they are frequenting and targeting regularly. They are definitely targeting Home Depots in the Washington State area. This is to help with the next step of response, but it is also to help just provide reassurance to people in the community who aren't actually part of the network in the sense they're not doing the response. They're the people that are impacted, so they're afraid. And yeah, a lot of what we are doing right now with these types of groups is just making sure that, okay, that actually wasn't ICE, that was something else. Oh, these vehicles you're seeing, these are for more normal processes. And that allows people to continue with their day-to-day as long as possible. Then the next step is you want to have some small, regional groups. The big group feeds the information down to the small, specific group, which is regional. And those are the people that do the action. They show up with the whistles. They show up to document what is happening, to investigate. Your options for what you do as far as an action goes really depend on how many people you have there and what their training and capabilities are. The only action I want to talk about today is documentation, because right now in a lot of places, if you haven't already set this up, you're not going to have the Minnesota 40 people show up the way that they do. They're far more advanced, and the invasion is more significant there. It's difficult to miss if you're in those regions that they're harassing and going door to door and all that bullshit. But in places like Seattle, where it's a lot less significant, there's a lot more quick strikes, you're probably only going to be 1 or 2 people there. What you want to focus on is documentation. getting the faces of the ICE agents, getting the plates of their vehicles, what type of vehicles they have, who their victims are, letting them know so that they can mount some sort of defense fund. Again, people are getting snatched out of running, moving cars, and they're just leaving it on the highway. So like, they're not going to report when they steal these people. So you could be doing a huge favor to at least a family member or somebody who cares, because that person's not going to come home at the end of their work shift or whatever. And you can at least provide them that guidance. The tool I recommend for this is Signal. It's not super great for bigger groups. I will simply say this, but figuring out a vetting process, who's going to be in the big group, what do they need to know, who needs to vouch for them or whatever. Small groups probably should be tighter, more vetted, more specific. You want to use Signal because you want encrypted communication. There's other tools you can do. A lot of them aren't encrypted. But they're going after Renee's entire network of people, which is probably just fucking PTA parents and shit. So this will help you protect yourself and other people. Okay, so let's also talk about preparing for the street a little bit. So I think the Hong Kong protests are a good model to kind of look back at and watch some of that footage and see how competent military and policing forces operate in crowds and how those crowds operate against them. It's really important to protect your head. I would prioritize head and eye protection very, very highly. Gas masks are great, but you can outrun a gas mask. Helmets and eye protection, those are going to take chemical, again, it's the blast balls, right? It's the things that they can do remotely to you that are highly kinetic. Bullets, pepper balls, all that shit. Knee and elbow pads are going to be nice. It's easy to fall down, especially in winter in Minneapolis. Ask the ICE agents, they know. But also, if you get tackled or arrested, they're not being soft. They're looking to hurt you. Gloves are really important, again, as like a thing. When we fall down, we often outstretch our hands, so protecting it for that reason. But also, there's lots of things like canisters, or we may want to pick up and chuck out and get away. Boots is another big one. I don't know, I forgot that. Something where you could kick like a metal object and it not hurt your foot would be great. But you also need to think about surviving kind of in your home or in a sustained method when it's not safe to leave. So making sure that you have enough food and water and cash to just kind of like stay home. Also making sure you maybe have backup power systems, battery generation, propane, cooking pieces, or even like a gas, like a generator or something. Having another place you could dip out to would be good. Having a secondary phone would be awesome. Maybe a backup secure phone. I know we're talking about money here, but I don't know. Are you still buying like $60 video games, $80 video games now? Communicating your plans to loved ones or people around you. I often talk to my neighbors about the things I'm doing because I have a pet and I want to make sure it's taken care of if something happens to me. And finally, this is dark, but I think it's important to be real. Have you sorted out your final affairs? Maybe just an informal like document that you sign can help. I don't have a lot of shit, but these are things that it can help out in the event that something happens to you unexpectedly. Even in situations where you're not dead, maybe you're just not accessible or you can't be communicated to for long periods of time. This kind of thing can help other people. So let me end talking about the things that I am laser focused paying attention to because I think that they are going to contribute significantly to the next phase, whatever that looks like, of this conflict. So we've got the Minnesota elected officials, Tim Walz and the Mayor Frey, telling people to just be peaceful, continue to be peaceful. We got to be peaceful. That's not a direct anything. That's just, that's basically just victim blaming your population. And a lot of people are upset about that. Although I will say that, again, from a tactical, peaceful movement perspective, I am guessing that there's a lot of people who feel like there is nothing that they could possibly do other than that. Like that's going to be the liberal mentality, is that this is the best thing they can possibly do and everything else is kind of out of their hands. Again, liberalism fucking sucks. That's why we're not a liberal. The new year is here, so a lot of states' legislative bodies have finally gone back into session, and so they are now talking about what laws they could be putting in order to try to protect communities. That's very, very popular right now, and one of the most popular ones is preventing law enforcement agencies from wearing masks. And this is something that Bob Ferguson, the governor of Washington, is doing, California is doing. These seem to be somewhat effective at maybe getting ICE to choose specific targets, but the reality is they don't care. When they have full immunity, they'll probably do whatever they want. And this might actually mostly just impact local police, which we're going to talk about here in just a second, because that is critical to be paying attention to. And then, of course, we've got the federal people who could, at the end of January, shut the government down if they wanted to. But I think we all know they're probably not going to, and they're signaling that they're going to keep the government running. And, now that we have seen them buckle under the last shutdown, we can probably just expect that that's going to happen. So what you can probably see is that none of our elected officials are really doing anything critical and urgent to save us from what is happening from ICE. That's really the point I want to make and show you. And I don't have a lot of solutions to that. I'm an anarchist. I don't really believe in any of these people. I mentioned in the last video I talked about with ICE that I think most of them need to be replaced because they are not up to the task of actually protecting communities and defeating fascism. Because to do that, you need to have core principles that you are drawing from, that you do your analysis from. And these people simply do not. Their core values are largely just a finger in the wind for polling. And that's not how you run a country. That's how you get to where we're at right now. All right, so let's talk about the local police, because this is the real scary part here. In the wake of Renee Good's killing, a Minneapolis resident who I assume paid taxes which fund the Minneapolis Police Department, the guild for that Minneapolis Police Department came out and complained about the anti-police rhetoric that they said was making the situation dangerous. I talked in the last video about how a lot of individual law enforcement officers probably support ICE. And what we are clearly seeing now is there is a line being drawn where some of these police departments are clearly saying they are going to join the federal forces over the local community that pays their salary that they are accountable to. They do not believe they are accountable to their constituents. And when you watch Mayor Frey with the police chief right over his shoulder, he just looks like he is terrified of them and he feels totally out of control. And how fucked up is it that our politicians now, that many of them are saying how afraid they are of local cops? That's why in my last short, I talked about how we can't just abolish ICE. We need to abolish the police, which are both feeding ICE with people, but are also part of the same project. Police in this country started in order to protect people's property, not to protect safety or loss of life. That's why your first kind of organizations that slowly became the police were things like slave catchers. And here we are a couple hundred years later, and we're really not very far from that. These institutions are racist and white supremacist and designed to keep people down, which is why they will never create justice. If you want a police force to focus on the safety and protection of the community, you need to build it from the ground up with that intent, not protecting rich people from getting their shit stolen. Now, some police, like the Philly police chief, are coming out and saying that they don't support ICE, and it's very, very easy for a police department and a police chief and elected officials to talk big smack against ICE and against the federal agencies and all this shit that people are saying at the Trump regime until it's on their doorstep. And that's when it truly matters. And so I just really want to have I'm glad to hear this, I want to hear that. But the reality is this is going to be a separation point. And I can't confidently say that I believe that this is gonna maintain, The scariest thing is that there are many people at the tops of our law enforcement agencies, like Keith Swank, the Pierce County Sheriff. He's the sheriff over like Tacoma and like the region just south of me here in King County. And he is an overt right-wing extremist.
Some of my colleagues naively believe that they can come here and reason with you. They don't understand what's at stake here. They don't understand you like I do. I wasn't elected chief of police. Being sheriff of Pierce County is much more than police work. Citizens reach out to me all the time regarding overreach of the government by you. Some say they finally have a voice because of me, and you want to silence it because I said transgender women are men. I said the truth. You want to give unelected bureaucracy the ability to decertify me and remove me from office because you don't agree with my speech. Just for the record, my deputies don't wear masks, but once you pass this law that they can't, I will not only allow them, but I will encourage them to do so just to see what you do. I don't recognize your authority to impose these controls over me, and when you try to remove me from office, thousands of Pierce County residents will surround the county city building in downtown Tacoma and will not allow that to happen. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I and they are prepared. Are you prepared? Finally, anyone who votes for this will never have an audience with this sheriff.
Thank you. Could I have you identify yourself for the record? I'm sorry, that is not what we do at public hearings, and you will be asked to be removed if that continues. And I'm sorry, Sheriff, for the record, we do need you to identify yourself by name.
Keith Swank.
I'm sorry, can I have you come do that at the mic so we can capture that information?
My name is Keith Swank, Pierce County Sheriff.
Thank you so much.
Last week, Keith Swank and all of the other police leadership in Washington State were at a meeting, a rally with Michael Flynn. And Michael Flynn has been going around recruiting military and law enforcement into Trump's larger political military project. He is building support for whatever the next full military action that Trump is doing. I mean, including Venezuela, Greenland, and whenever he tries to deploy the military to American streets. Keith Swank has tried to disarm trans people, has spoken very openly about trying to disarm trans people. And we need to get him the fuck out of that position. And that's a me problem. It's a community problem here. But I hope you're looking into your local police leadership, because if you don't know what they're going to do, you need to figure it out. ICE is scary, but what makes ICE even scarier is that when they come to your local community and they effectively recruit local cops into their mission. In Minneapolis, local cops have joined against the community. In LA, the cops there joined against their community. In Seattle, when Christian nationalists came here, our cops joined against our community. Both of these are pressure points we should start working on to solve these problems. You do not want to have these questions when ICE comes to your community, if you can all avoid it. So these are two things that I am watching and I am trying to put pressure on, and I really encourage you to do the same. One of the wild things looking at all the protests and actions happening right now is that this is the winter time. You know, this is supposed to be really, truly like a time where people are just kind of sitting in their homes, chilling, relaxing. We just got out of the holiday season. You know, January is supposed to be a time where right after the holidays, everybody's supposed to be like going back to work, getting back in the swing of things. And yet there are thousands and thousands of people across this country in the streets speaking out against ICE and the things that this regime is doing. I hope you're staying locked in, because I think that this is a very important moment in this country's future, which is why I'm trying to make videos as often as possible. I'm trying to communicate what I see, why I'm not just like all these other YouTubers who are just continuing to make the same normal shit and kind of keep you disassociated away from the things that are going to be important to your future. I find that to be really, really sad. But I know that everyone else is just trying to get their bag and maybe try to disassociate their concerns away. But yeah, we're all going to be impacted. Just an idea for everyone who has like a big audience and cares about the future of their family, their kids, maybe especially if you're one of these people that's not blonde-haired and blue-eyed like me. If you've got a following, now's the time to be talking about this, to getting people activated and engaged. You don't have to make it your only bag, the only thing you talk about, but you know, letting people know where you fall on ICE murdering people in the streets, where you fall on the violence and the rhetoric. You know, it could start the process of getting people engaged. And is it going to lose you fans and followers and money? Yeah, definitely. But that's coming anyway. As people lose the ability to pay for things, we're already seeing it. I expect in a month we will have a lot more reports, because like the end of January is the fiscal for most businesses here. So sometime in February, we are going to start hearing more about layoffs. Amazon's going to do more layoffs. The tech companies are going to do more layoffs. I expect more retail layoffs. And eventually the things that you were protecting, the things that you were trying to keep safe, they're just going to go away anyway. So That's why you should speak out now and not be a coward. But I don't know your life and I don't know what you got going on. So I hope you stay safe if that's what you're trying to do. But other than that, we're riding fast. We're taking chances. I got my R1M fixed back up, so we're going to start doing that again. And I'm hoping to do some corking on MLK Day. Have a great MLK Day. MLK is the exact type of person we need to be reading about and studying right now. But let me suggest you don't forget about Malcolm X, because I personally find him to be more motivating. His messages and the things that he talks about, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a hypocrisy. That's the type of thing that I connect with. So ride fast and take chances. I forgot to mention that you can now support Minneapolis directly. There's a website that now contains a whole bunch of links to different groups that are mutual aid groups that are there, which I donated to. I'll provide that here, and then I'll give you some links in the description. So if you want to help the tip of the spear, which is what I encourage, if you want to protect yourself, because the more they wear it out in a selfish way and the more they wear out in another community, the harder it's going to be. Hopefully when they come to you, the less they'll have when they come to you. I'm doing it because in a true leftist movement, you need to show solidarity as much as you can. And I want to have solidarity with Minneapolis because I went through 2020. This shit is looking a lot like fucking 2020 again. I want to help them however I can. Peace.